I tell people there are two things you need to make it as a card counter: brains and a bankroll. Brains means you need to have the skills to beat the game, but you also need a bankroll. Well, how much bankroll do you need to make it as a card counter? I'm going to answer that in this video. I'm Colin from Blackjack Apprenticeship. I've been a successful card counter for over 15 years. I've won over $600,000 personally. That was in the 2 or 3 years that I played full-time. Then I transitioned into running teams, which have won $4 million at card counting. We as a collective at Blackjack Apprenticeship have taken many millions of dollars from casinos, but to do that, you need proper bankroll management. Of course, I said you need the brains to do it. You need to have a winning game, but you need proper bankroll management. Well, how much do you actually need? There's kind of two extremes out there. One is the thought of, I can go to a casino with $100 and just double it. I'm not trying to be greedy, I just want to make $100 a day. Well, $100 is not going to be enough to make it as a card counter. The other extreme is that you need a $20,000 bankroll to even consider making money as a card counter. Well, that's not true either, but let me explain to you what you can actually expect as far as bankroll size as a card counter. My story is that when I first got into card counting, I was actually working at Red Robin. I was making about $20 an hour when you include tips, which wasn't too shabby. But during that same time, my friend that was also getting into card counting took it more seriously. I kind of just watched because I didn't know if this was going to be worth his time. And at first he was making, $5 an hour. And then as his bankroll grew, he was able to make $10 an hour and $20 an hour and $40 an hour. And I remember talking to him on the phone and saying, "How's that card counting thing going?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm averaging about $80 an hour now." And I remember thinking, okay, maybe this is worth looking into. So I started with what I had, what I was able to convince my wife that I could start with, which was a $2,000 bankroll. And I was content to sit there and grow my bankroll. Well, 6 months later, me and the two buddies I got into it with, we'd grown a $100,000 bankroll. And at that point, we were making a couple $100s an hour counting cards at the casino. If I hadn't been content starting small, I would have never gotten there big. And whether you get into card counting or not, it's up to you. But let me give you some numbers that you can expect for different bankroll sizes. How much of a bankroll do you need to make it as a card counter? The problem is it kind of depends. There's a number of variables. The first thing is, what are the limits that you're able to play? Lower limits, or better yet, back counting and waiting for a positive true count to even sit down. That's going to save you some money and lower your risk on a smaller bankroll. Secondly, what's the deck penetration and the rules? If they have favorable rules, if they cut off fewer cards, you're going to be able to generate more EV even on a smaller bankroll or on a larger bankroll than if you have access to games that have crummy rules and poor deck penetration. This is why I tell people don't play online blackjack. The rules of deck penetration are so bad, you shouldn't even bother. You're just gambling at those games basically. Third, what's your risk tolerance? The bigger your bankroll, the lower you can keep your risk. But if you're willing to kind of take a run at it with higher risk, you might lose your entire bankroll, but you can actually generate more money by betting more. Do I recommend really high risk? Not really. But some people, it's kind of no guts, no glory, or go big or go home. So there are these different variables like the limits, the rules, the deck penetration, and your risk tolerance that are all going to affect how much you need and how much you can make at the tables. Here are some kind of benchmark amounts you can make in terms of EV and the corresponding risk for different bankroll sizes. The first one would be a $1,000 bankroll. With a $1,000 bankroll, you're not going to be making more than $10 an hour EV, and that's with even 40 or 50% risk of ruin. What that means is if you have 10 card counters, 4 or 5 of them are going to lose their $1,000. The other 5 or 6 are going to be okay. They're going to make it. Do I recommend that? Not really. But if you have $1,000 and you could save another $1,000, well, that might be what you decide to do. And $10 an hour might even be on the generous side unless you can find a good game that you can play at. You can back count and wait for good counts to sit in. So this thought that you can just take some pocket change and make it as a card counter is just not true. However, that same $10 an hour game would drop from 40 or 50% risk down to about 10% risk with a $3,000 bankroll. So what that means is if you can save some more money, or if you happen to be winning, once you get up to about $3,000, your risk has gone way down. If you're able to get up to $5,000 bankroll through saving, through whatever it is to get there, your risk is going to be much lower for that $10 an hour game. With about a $5,000 bankroll, you can continue to make about $10 an hour with 2% risk of ruin, which every pro that I know wants to keep their risk at 2% or below. When I had a $5,000 bankroll, I was playing higher than that. I don't know if I should have been, but kind of went for it. It worked out okay, but that means there's also a higher chance I could have lost everything. So you can stay at 2% risk of ruin with $5,000 and make about $10 an hour, or you can increase your betting and make a bit more. But let's say that you're able to grow things to about a $10,000 bankroll. Well, when you've gotten to that point, you can expect to make about $20 an hour of EV at the tables, still keeping your risk at about 2% risk of ruin. And I know that some people are saying, why would you risk $10,000 to make $20 an hour? But hear me out. You're going to see how this thing scales as you grow a bankroll. So with a $10,000 bankroll, you could increase your risk to 5% and make about $40 an hour, or what I would personally do is wait till I've grown my bankroll more. So now when you've scaled it to about $20,000 bankroll, or if you have access to a $20,000 bankroll, you can make about $40 to $50 an hour with 1 to 2% risk of ruin. So yeah, it's risking $20,000, but $40 to $50 an hour isn't bad for an investment. Now, when you're getting up to the $50,000 bankroll size, that's when you're getting closer to that pro level. With a $50,000 bankroll, you should be playing games that are worth $100 to $200 an hour of EV while still keeping your risk at 2% or below. And obviously it goes up from there. When we had a $100,000 bankroll, we were wanting to play games that were a minimum of $200 an hour EV. If we found a game and it was less than $200 an hour of EV, we'd still play it, but we're also playing some games that were as much as $400 or even $500 an hour of EV. When I ran the church team, we had $1 million bankroll. So we were playing games that were in the $300 to $1,000 an hour range, high limits, high EV, but our risk was at 0.1% risk of ruin. That meant less than 1 in 1,000 card counters would lose their bankroll based on the way we were playing. And if we lost, we still scaled our bankroll back to continue to keep risk low, because $1 million bankroll, you don't want to risk losing. So that's kind of a high level overview of bankroll sizes and what they will mean for you in terms of EV and risk. Now, like I said before, there's a lot of variables, but this gives you kind of a big picture understanding of how your bankroll size is going to affect your EV. Wait, before you go and grab $2,000, $5,000, or $10,000 and head to the casino, there's something really important you need to know. All these numbers I just shared are based on a perfect game as a card counter, perfect basic strategy, perfect counting, perfect betting, perfect deviations, and of course, a winning bet spread and perfect bankroll management. If you don't have those skills, then there's no amount of bankroll that's going to save you at the tables. You can get lucky and win in the short term, but you will lose your bankroll if you don't have a perfect game. I've seen too many people head to the casinos without a perfect game, with a 97 or 98% game, and lose money at the casinos and then complain that the system doesn't work. It's not the system. The system works. The math adds up. You need a flawless game and you need to protect your bankroll. For more, you can check out our video, 3 skills every card counter needs, or you can check out our free card counting mini course at Blackjack Apprenticeship, where I walk you through how to think and act like a card counter. And I'll also drop a link below to a more full article I wrote on bankroll management and recommended bankroll size. It's got a lot more numbers in there. You can check it out. Otherwise, we'll see you next week.